Hopefully this doesn't boot his screen off. Okay. How's everybody doing? I've got Tyler here in the room. I see a number of folks here on the call. I know Sean Wheeler's here. Plenty of the regulars. Awesome. Okay. And I think Jim True is going to be joining us a little bit later. Steve is out today, as is Heyman. So it's going to be Tyler and I up until Jim joins us to talk a little bit about Script Analyzer. So we're going to start with sort of giving you guys a heads up of where I've been and why I've been sort of off the grid in the last month and a half, 2 months, and what I'm working on. Basically, once we launched, and we were pretty upfront about this, I think. Once we launched 6.0 GA, that was sort of the opportunity or the gate for a lot of teams having conversations with us inside of Microsoft around porting their modules and command lines to PowerShell core. And so I've been spending the vast majority of my time beyond OpenSSH work, for PowerShell at least, doing a lot of outreach to partner teams, talking to teams within Windows. Heyman and I have been working closely with the Azure PowerShell folks, who I think you've been seeing make a lot of progress on the Net Core modules. We've been starting conversations with folks within Azure. Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. There should be sound. If you're not getting sound, you should probably quit the call and rejoin. Sorry, guys. Quit and rejoin if you are having sound problem. Yeah, so I've actually been doing work, but yeah, we're heavily engaged, right? We're talking to the module owners that you guys have been saying, you want the most. That means like Active Directory, Azure PowerShell, the Exchange and SharePoint Online modules. I know Azure Active Directory is very popular. So while I don't have anything to commit to yet, we're sort of in the early days here. In terms of starting to get this stuff ported over, we are having some very meaningful engagements and are getting that ball rolling so that PowerShell core continue to operate for these existing workloads that you guys are used to. So just be patient with us. Hopefully some of those are also going to start lighting up on the gallery. We've got a strong push there, we'll have more to share soon there in terms of coverage. One of the things that is sort of, I wouldn't say blocking that effort, but is a forcing function of that effort is PowerShell Standard, which I've talked about a number of times. Jim's been working really hard on a PowerShell Standard 5.1. So the committee's been sort of reviewing that API set. We've also been finding some problems in PowerShell Standard 3 that the generation of 5.1 has sort of illuminated. So we've got a bunch of spreadsheets out there where we're sort of looking at the API level and then the method and constructor and property level to make sure that we're not exposing anything in either of the PowerShell standards that is not present in 6, or that we're not missing anything in one of the standards that turned out to be in 6, in the late game of GA. Yeah, I hear somebody on the call there. Is there always open, by the way, for comments and questions. Feel free to interrupt me here.
It might have just been a sneeze.
Bless you. So anyway, PowerShell standard. The goal is really with these teams internally as well. We want them compiling against PowerShell standard because it is the way that we continue to stay compatible with Windows PowerShell while also bringing core into the fold. We actually just had Jim walk in the room, so he's as I said.
Computer, Mike.
Yes, Mike. But yeah, I think we're trying to have another preview out probably by end of February. Is that accurate, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Jim's optimistic that it's sooner, but I know to always pad with a good doubling or tripling of an ETA. I know I saw the woo from Joel. I know you've been waiting for the 5.1 standard for a while, so that will allow people to finally build universal modules that take advantage of the new language features that we have in 5. Some of the new AST stuff, that was added there. So we know that's in high demand, and we'll have that for you soon.
Can I ask a question related to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any guidance for actually hosting PowerShell 6?
Yeah. So we've got some basic documentation up that's not in the official docs. It's only in the PowerShell repo. And one of the efforts that I'm talking about with Sean right now is how we sort of finally modernize the SDK reference or the SDK conceptual content. So a lot of the content around building commandlets is still orphaned inside of MSDN and is extremely outdated, and we know that we want to bring that forward to docs.microsoft and sort of reconcile that with what we have in the GitHub repo.
And a NuGet package as well for the assemblies.
Yeah, so there's and I think that issue was actually authored by me like a million years ago, which is to publish the implementation assemblies to NuGet. Today, the guidance is sitting in the docs folder of the GitHub repo under host PowerShell, and there's a sample for hosting for 6.0 beta.3 and later, and that uses in the NuGet config our myget feed, which has the implementation assemblies for PowerShell 6. So there was a bug that Aditya fixed in the PowerShell 6 implementation assembly for Linux, which was actually blocking some XUnit test runs where we were hosting PowerShell 6 for Azure PowerShell. But those have been fixed, and I believe he published a new one. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for the link there. I should have just pulled it up. But
He's working on
this is where you can actually see the myget feed that we use, and then the .NET Core myget feed as well, where we're pulling that in. So, that's the guidance there. But we definitely like all of that should be absolutely wrapped up in real documentation and published at Microsoft very soon.
One of the things, so I have actually seen this document before, and I have not spent enough time, but I have failed at following it. And I think that part of the problem is not being sure. It appears to me that I essentially, in order to host PowerShell 6, I essentially need to host .NET, because I essentially need to compile a .NET executable like what PowerShell.exe does. It's very confusing. I'm not sure that is true, but I haven't been able to get it to work, even shipping, even copying the entire contents of the folder in. So I will go through this again, and I will file issues.
Okay. No, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, and again, you're correct that you have to essentially do the same thing that we do when we build a standalone executable. Otherwise, you have to execute it with .NET. Right? You can always host your application, type .NET run, and see if it works. Then you actually have to target it at a platform and build the executable for it.
Yeah, and I know there's a shared framework model, but I think that no matter what happens, you end up, whether the DLLs for NetCore are sitting in a shared folder or sitting in your app local folder.
Well, they need to be found somehow.
You're right. But I'm saying inevitably at the end of it, you have to have an application.
Yeah, you need a platform executable. Otherwise, you're using .NET to run it, which is kind of not a great experience.
Right.
But the high order bit here is that it would be really nice if you had some documentation that you could follow to help you do that.
It's essentially the issue is that hosting, although the document says hosting this is the same as hosting PowerShell in .NET, it's not true. Because I have to actually ship the entire .NET framework and link it so that it works. And
you shouldn't actually have to ship the .NET framework. You only have to ship the bits that you are referencing, right?
Well, yeah, but PowerShell ships a huge portion of the framework. And
Correct.
if modules are going to work in my hosted, I need to ship at least as much of it as you do.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Right. Okay.
Because remember the whole thing about .NET is that it is self-contained, right?
Right. No, I get that. Essentially what's missing is a step that says here's what you need to do to make sure that you're shipping the same bits that we're shipping, so that modules will work.
You're quite right, and that's a well taken point. Is that the documentation should include something like at the end .NET Publish, which actually does does all what you're talking about. Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, thanks. I'll work on it a little bit this week and file an issue if I can't figure it out.
And if you want to provide too in that issue that you inevitably file, sort of your scenario, Joel, for why it is you're trying to host PowerShell, I think that'll kind of help us understand.
The answer to that, by the way, is very easy. It's Jupyter. You know the notebooks.azure.com.
I'm well aware of Jupyter. We actually had Sergey, who used to be on the team, did a Jupyter PowerShell kernel experiment.
Yeah, but his calls PowerShell.exe.
It was long time ago, and it was just a hackathon little,
Yeah, he's updated it to work with PowerShell 6, but it's calling PowerShell.exe. And anyway, I wanted to try to make something that I could use on notebooks. .azure.
It would be super nice to have like a recipe that says, here's an example, here's how you build it, here's how you distribute it. I totally get that. That's well taken. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I absolutely agree.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to address just real quick is just make sure, did anybody else have any questions with standard? Just open the floor to that before I move on.
Does everybody know about the
Yeah, go ahead.
On the compatibility pack and how it plays in with this. What's the strategy behind that ultimately? Is it going to be included at some point into core, or are you keeping it as separate packages strategically?
Yeah, I think strategically we do want to leave it as probably an external module. And I think one of the first steps, I just had a conversation with Steve about this yesterday. One of the first things we want to do is just sort of move out. And by the way, this is before we move on from the standard stuff. This is the PowerShell standard repository that Jim has stood up, so you can actually track the work we're doing on the API stuff out of this repository now. We're going to build and define those assemblies. But yeah, for the compatibility pack, the first step is just to take that sort of Windows PS module path function that Steve published on the gallery at launch time that just adds your Windows PowerShell module path back to your path into that module. So it's sort of a more general module. At some point, we also want to do an experiment around implicit remoting and maybe being able to, basically talk to the Windows PowerShell instance on the box via some transparent implicit remoting, so that if you try to execute a function that we know is not compatible with PowerShell core, that we can sort of ask Windows PowerShell to do it, and then it'll hand us back that sort of dead object. But it's better than nothing. We also, want to add back into that module all of the APIs that .NET added back. That basically, there's for those who don't know, there's a set of APIs that .NET can run perfectly fine within .NET Core on Windows, but that they don't have an understanding or a desire to port over to Mac or Linux. And so one good example of this is, I believe, it might not be back yet, but the underlying APIs that we use for getWMyObject are no longer present in .NET Core, but they want to add them back in the .NET Core Windows compatibility pack. And so at that point, we would also add back the getWMyObject commandlet. I'm seeing a comment about secure string. My understanding is secure string is in .NET Core all up. We were actually the ones that kind of pushed on .NET to add secure string back. The issue with secure string is simply that on Linux, it doesn't do anything. It's basically a string.
Well, it's still it still does something. It's still randomized. I mean, it still has it has a lifetime, which regular strings don't. So, meaning it's destroyed when you lose reference and all that.
It could be read out of memory the same way. It's not there's no cryptographic promises because Linus, I think rightfully so, keeps cryptography out of the kernel, and you can't make any cryptographic promises at a Linux level that you can make in Windows because we have that stuff in the kernel. Yes. So anyway, that module I think will remain distinct for a while. I'm not closing the door to having more package additions for PowerShell. This is something we've had in the back of our minds for a really long time. I think at some point, I'd like to have this sort of monolith developer tool package for PowerShell that someone's going to install on their dev machine with all the compatibility packs and the PS read lines and the all the nice interactive gobbledygook, and then have a sort of very, very thin runtime only agent package, so to speak, that doesn't carry any of that stuff and is much smaller in size. And we've been doing some refactoring work to support that. I know, for instance, Aditya has been working on the sort of pulling the help system out of system.management.automation and putting it into its own module in assembly. And so, as part of that effort, I think you'll inevitably see some dividends paid where we have a version that you can download that's not including all this. But I think for now we still have to hedge, and part of that hedging is saying, well, if this is a whole bunch of DLLs that is somewhat legacy, like get to my object, we don't really want you to use it, right? But if you have to, then you can get this compatibility pack and you do that. But if we hear feedback that hey, 98% of the users want this thing by default, like why the heck wouldn't you just put it in? We can go down that road. So yeah, and Nicholas, you're making a great point in the chat. Yeah, this sort of Uber developer package could very well include extra developer-y modules like Sake, Plaster, Pester, all that stuff. So I think that there's probably good value there, but again, this is a back of the mind conversation. I appreciate the now input, but this will be a conversation happening over the course of the next many months. So yeah. Did that answer your question on the I don't remember who had it, but on the compatibility pack?
I think I lost a little bit in there, but it sounds like what you're saying is the answer was sort of yes, that the strategy is to sort of try and get as much of that included. And you were mentioning some remoting magic that you were looking to perhaps do with 5.1 on a machine. But yeah, I think I got a gist.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. So also just wanted to quickly address the sort of PR backlog. We have a lot of pull requests. We appreciate the contributions as always. We're super happy that there are that many pull requests, but we also understand that having a backlog of pull requests is not desirable. I can't speak to the timeline on which Steve's going to address these. Unfortunately, we've been very much backed up with some compliance backlog. I've been off doing the coverage stuff. The maintainers have been dealing with a bunch of internal requirements around shipping supported software. One of those is actually we're working to support Microsoft Update for servicing. So in the future, if you've installed via the MSI, we want it to be such that in Windows Update, if you've checked that box to give me updates for other Microsoft products, that we can actually offer servicing updates to PowerShell Core as or even recommended updates, if there's a security fix that we need to push out. So, and that means we'll be in the Microsoft Update catalog, which means you can add your stuff into WSUS, I believe, and do all that sort of management. So, I'm seeing your comment here, Joel, on the chat. I think that's a very good point. I don't let's cross that bridge when we get to it. I think. there's a lot of conversation to have there before we actually decision there. But yeah, the Microsoft update, we need that to be out there. We want to have a parity functional experience with what we've got on Mac with Homebrew and Linux with the various package managers. Way that integrates with all the IT tool chains that you guys have been using, like SCCM and WSUS. So, yes, plans to bring on some more community maintainers with merge privileges. I think that's a great idea, Mark.
I've already done it in the script analyzer repo.
Yes, and it's been done in the editor services repo for a long time, VS Code repo. I think that's a great idea, Mark, and I think that we should absolutely have that conversation internally. One of the things we realized early on, I believe it was when Ilya first was added as not a contributor with merge privileges, but somebody with triage privileges and all that stuff, is that we really shouldn't have people conversations out in the open. And this was something I learned in going to some open source conferences and talking to a lot of folks. We had a strong desire to be super transparent and super open, and instead, we realized that you can go too far with that, and that talking about people out in the open is really just not a nice thing to do. So we're going to have to sort of go, into the exception where we go into a closed room and have the conversation on some folks, but and then reach out to people to find out if they're interested. But I think that we're definitely at the stage in the project where I've seen contributions, strong, thoughtful, mindful contributions from folks out in the community, and I absolutely want to leverage that to start unblocking some of our pull requests and to really establish a better sense of community and collaboration within the project. So I think that's absolutely something we want to start talking about more. Back to Ryan's question here, why can't we have a commandlet in PS Core say get PS update? We absolutely should, and I think we will. Our prioritization and thinking was twofold. One, we want to enable the existing tool chains where they are, right? So people manage on Windows machines. They manage installations of packages and servicing for official Microsoft products using Microsoft Update, SCCM, and WSUS. So we want to make sure that those primitives are there, and we're not creating completely new constructs for people. And anything that we do should sort of hook over those constructs. The other line of thinking is that we really don't want to establish a pattern of shipping modules in the PowerShell gallery that install applications. There's sort of this interesting situation with package management, formerly OneGet, and Chocolatey, and the fact that Chocolatey is sort of this community-maintained repository of applications. And one of the things we very much decided that we did not want to establish a pattern for, even with PowerShell itself, is having chocolatey-looking packages in the PowerShell gallery. The PowerShell gallery is for modules and not for install scripts for applications, and that's really a line that we don't want to cross, I think. That being said, I think it's perfectly reasonable to ship a thing into PowerShell that could do an update PowerShell core or something like that, or get PS update or whatever you have, that talks to the Microsoft Update APIs and uses them to find out whether we have. We're not creating two ways to do the same thing. But Jim is grinning right now, so he's got something good to say.
I would love to see a pull request come from the community that implements get PS update.
It's I think you're being a little facetious, because I would actually not love to see that, because we'll be stuck in review hell while we all decide what the right pattern is there. So I think really we wanted to find not make a one-off here, and to find a little bit more of a pattern. We did stand up Linux repos. Isn't it time for an equivalent for Windows? Yes, I would love to have that, and I'm still not sitting within Windows, and I'm not empowered to make that happen. So I would say, Windows has an application story today, and that's the Windows Store. And, for those applications that cannot use the store, we have Microsoft Update and MSIs. And I love to tell people I use Chocolatey every day at home. Yeah, no, I was just kind of trying to do the thematic groupings here, or the easier questions. So what about PowerShell management tool for Mac OS with SCCM or Intune, automate Mac OS deployment via PowerShell? So let me just get a little more clarification on that one. Do you mean you want a client tool for SCCM or Intune on a Mac that allows you to manage and update Windows machines, or you want something that's actually going to do the SCCM equivalent on your fleet of MacBooks? Yes to which one?
Equivalent. Oh, that's not ours.
Yeah, so to manage a fleet of MacBooks, yeah. So that is unfortunately outside of our wheelhouse. I would absolutely suggest that. I think SCCM has a user voice that you can post suggestions on, and I would implore you to go there to tell them that that's something you want. Yeah, package stuff in RPMs. Yeah. So you should definitely go tell the SCCM team that. I believe we also, we also have this service within Azure, Update Management, that we've been pushing for a while, that does both Windows and Linux. I'm not sure that we have Mac support there. I think it's primarily targeted at server scenarios. I am not aware of what Intune's strategy is for MacBook machines, but I would be willing to bet that they had a strategy there. On Linux too, there's also the you've got the Red Hat satellite sort of thing. So that was our thinking for using RPMs where they're the first class. So I think that's everything on this topic. Michael Lombardi, I that is really like, I hear you, and that's. Oh, you're actually saying, hey, make a Chocolatey feed. Don't reinvent Chocolatey, just reinvent the community feed with an official repository.
It was more of a clarifying question for Darwin, who I think actually maintains several of those packages. Like, is that kind of what you're getting at? Is that Microsoft should have like here are the in-house maintained packages.
Right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Darwin. Something DevOpsy. The Windows Store is like the utter opposite of DevOps as far as everything.
Yes.
And also, I don't care what it's called. It just has to be a NuGet feed, obviously. The one other small thing would be if we could get a hook so that those NuGet packages could automatically process just a single PowerShell that's inside. Like Chocolatey does, then that would make it more of a complete experience. But even if I have to do a NuGet install and then know that there's a PowerShell inside the folders that are extracted to call, that would be even better than nothing.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Joel.
Just 2 cents. I can't speak for Rob, but if you promised to ship PowerShell as Chocolatey packages, I think that I could promise that there would be a Chocolatey, a first-class binary Chocolatey provider. We had one in the works, but there's just not enough motivation for doing it. And I mean, for install package, for the built-in package management stuff.
Yeah. No, I think, I have never... I've considered a scenario where we build something that looks a lot like Chocolatey, and I don't really have any interest in doing that, and I think Windows has sort of an anti-interest in us doing that. I think I've also imagined a world where we sort of adopt Chocolatey and say, hey, this is great, and we're going to maintain or have some sort of rights to maintain our applications on the community Chocolate feed. Something I had not considered was a signed Microsoft only Chocolatey feed where we're using the Chocolatey tooling, but sort of hosting a packages.microsoft.com equivalent, for Chocolatey. But again, all of these are I'm speaking purely in terms of theoretical technology conversations and not in terms of strategic conversations. And this is significantly above my pay grade, I think, in terms of making these sorts of calls. So I think that's, from a technology standpoint, something I had not thought about, and is absolutely something I can go back and talk to folks with, because I do think that at least from a technology standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. Hold
your breath.
But yeah, don't hold your breath. Yeah, I think it does, Michael, and I think there's a case to be made that if we're following the parity model of supporting, customer requested community tools in a best practices way, as defined by those tools, as we have with RPM and Deb and Arch and all of those things, Docker Hub, there's a case to be made there. So.
What about, this is Darwin, what about taking ownership back of the or not ownership, but starting the open source development of the Chocolatey provider as well?
I think that those would have to go hand in hand, right? Like I think if we did the repo, we'd probably end up working on or doing the provider and finishing that out. But I think if the repo can't happen, then the provider probably can't happen either, at least from coming from us.
Also, the previous provider was, I think, one of the reasons it died was it was trying to synchronize, it recode but synchronize its functionality with Chocolatey. And so if it's redone, it would be good if it just used the copy of Chocolatey and required a copy of Chocolatey if you don't have one. You have to install it, but it's a stub over to the production code, not.
Yeah, that is correct. And there is one that was built, ironically, by somebody on the PowerShell Get team that does call Choco.
Okay. That, to me, that would be the best approach, because then the feature set doesn't always lag, and there's not always this hesitance to update two code bases.
Yeah, it's always that bootstrap problem, and then when we're dealing with the bootstrapping of community artifacts, that's where you start getting really hairy, because all of a sudden we're delivering, code that's not owned by us, and so if we went that route, we'd have to do the, we'd probably have to do something similar to Pester, where we do a soft fork and sign the thing and host it on some official Microsoft location in order for us to with Microsoft.
Yeah, I was just thinking just be a stub, and we have to install Chocolatey. If the installation part is the tough part. Yeah.
No, that's definitely the easier sort of minimum viable route, I think. So we can certainly, I think ultimately we'd have to solve the other problem for people, but I do think that's a reasonable first step, definitely. I'm really sorry you're not getting sound, Jeff. I apologize. It's he can't hear me. You have to close the window if you exit and rejoin the call for it to actually restart your connection to the call. I know that's crazy, but yeah, you end call and close the thing because it's got some connector still sitting out there. Yep, install at PS1, got dropped in 3, that's correct. I'm just looking up the here, so it's 10.10. Yep, okay, yeah, this is all addressed, I believe. Thomas Rainer, I don't have a more intelligent question than can you please do this? Jim, now that you're here, would you like to talk about Script Analyzer and what you're going to be doing with that for a few minutes?
Sure. As you might have noticed, there had been, if you had been paying attention to the repo, you may have noticed a large number of outstanding PRs that have been sitting around for a couple of months. Those are all now, the ones that deserve to be merged have been merged, and the ones that haven't were closed. We have, I think, 2 outstanding possible merges to do, and 1 that's not passing CI yet. my goal with the script analyzer is to kind of bring it into, I don't want to say compliance or conformance, but more along the lines of the technology that's used to build and the CI systems that are used.
Consistency.
Consistency is the word that I want. I want to make it consistent with PowerShell core, so you'll start to see packages of CI in Linux and Mac. You'll start to see the build scripts become a little bit more consistent across the repositories. I also created a large set of, I created a small set of what I think are kind of the immediate forthcoming PRs. First and foremost, we're also going to do a new release pretty soon. I'm still trying to figure out how to actually get that to work and work on automation for getting it signed and all the rest of it. Your participation is extremely welcome. So, but I'm kind of paying attention to it on a very regular basis, and I've added a new maintainer from the community, and so Bergmeister is the handle. So I think I'm pretty pleased with how things are moving so far, but always looking for input, feedback.
Yeah, so we recognize fully that Script Analyzer has languished for some period of time, and we really we want to sort of take it into the fold of the rest of the PowerShell projects as we've been running them in the same way that I think Steve mentioned this last week when I was gone, but in the same way that Steve now owns the PowerShell editor services and VS Code stuff with Tyler at the helm, we are he has also taken on the Script Analyzer, so it's really we want to put all of that in the same sort of bucket of work and make sure that we're driving those all consistently and with the PowerShell core strategy. I also have an immediate desire, and I don't know where we're at with this one, Jim, but beyond all the housekeeping that you sort of just described, I really want to start looking at the rules again. And sort of figuring out how we can make the rules more useful, and the immediate desire that I have there is to finally publish and sort of productize some rules that we've had internally for a while around analyzing PowerShell for version and platform compatibility. And so we have sort of a process where we build a catalog of all the types, the commandlets, and the internal PowerShell APIs that are available for a given platform or a given version or a given edition of PowerShell, and those go into I believe a JSON file that we then can consume to statically analyze your script to say, hey, this script or this module isn't going to work on Linux, or it's not going to work on Core, or it's not going to work on Full, or whatever. So I think right now that's being done down to 3. Really, the only cost that we incur here, Darwin, is that of standing up a VM with the version you want and running the scripts that go and generate all those catalogs. I think we probably want to do some catalogs too with PowerShell Standard once those are out there. And then, the idea is that you could set in like your Script Analyzer config, hey, I want to work on, Windows PowerShell 5 and PowerShell Core 6 only on Windows. And, you could get some squigglies that are going to tell you, hey, this is not going to work for you there. So basically something similar to the compile time promise that we would offer for C# based commandlets, where you're compiling against Net Standard 2.0 and PowerShell Standard. Any comments specifically on script-based rule support for the core rule set? Can you expand on that, Thomas?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
There is a state right now in Script Analyzer where if your rule isn't written in C#, then it can't be merged into the core rule set that ships with PS Script Analyzer. But if you're just running it yourself, if you're making custom rules, they can be PSM1s, they can be written in PowerShell. But those that you write in PowerShell can't be merged into the core rule set. David Wilson made an issue for me a while ago for that, and I was just curious if there were plans to fulfill that.
Go ahead.
I think from a perspective, I haven't got to those issues, so I haven't seen that one from David. I haven't read through all the issues yet, but it certainly seems like a reasonable request. I don't know why that. I don't know whether there's some technical thing behind it as to, there's a hard problem we need to solve, the script analyzer engine in order to support that or not. But it certainly seems like a reasonable request. That's for certain.
Yeah, I would say that part of this housekeeping that Jim wants to do is not just with the repo, but it's a bit of architectural housekeeping as well. There are definitely some design decisions made in Script Analyzer a long, long time ago that have bit us for a while. I know that there was a desire internally for some time to do a 2.0 release where we sort of broke from stuff and fixed up a lot of that. I don't know that we're going to go that far, but I certainly think that for stuff like this where it's just like, hey, why the heck can't I just like have a script-based rule when I can have script-based rules already? Like that's just that's sort of a doy in my mind, and it's like we'll
it's absolutely reasonable to have that expectation. I completely agree with that. So I'll try to find that issue and do a little bit digging. Quite frankly, I'm still kind of coming up to speed on the entire architecture of the repository and how it works and trying to figure out why it's different from everything else on the planet, and so that there's that. So I need to get my house in order before I can really start taking on any sort of architectural thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I already went and thumbs up it for you, Thomas.
No wonder I didn't see it done back in March of last year. Yeah, okay, coming on a year. Yeah, okay, groovy.
I think it makes a ton of sense, and we're gonna like those thumbs up certainly helps. When Tyler took over ownership of VS Code, PowerShell, and editor services, like literally the first thing we did was just sort by a bunch of thumbs and sort by a bunch of comments, and the really important stuff falls out. So the fact that you got 9 thumbs there, I think it'll probably pop to the stack when we're eventually looking at feature work. So
for sure. But let me just reiterate that from a feature perspective, I'm still looking to add features.
Yes.
So I'm not mothballing the thing at all.
Yes.
It is not. That is not what's going on. It needs to be up to date.
You're doing some housekeeping to lay a good foundation for future real feature development.
Correct.
Yes. Sort by thumb. It's way to go, Tyler. So Tyler, we got about 12 minutes left. Do you want to talk IoT and editor services?
Sure. Which one first? Do you want to take over the?
Yeah. I can take over the notes here, and you can just
do
think
one
and
thing.
talk. Yeah.
One thing at the same. All right. So IoT. Let's do that really quick. Yes, it's not open source just yet. The other guy working on it is Andrew on the team. He's definitely a lot more knowledgeable than I am with the IoT space. I kind of jumped in and thought that sounds fun, and I'm going to work on that. It's not open source yet. The only estimate I have so far is in a couple months. I think a couple months is very, very conservative, but that's the estimate that I'll stick with for right now. If you follow me on Twitter, you see I occasionally post images of some of the module working with different sensors and stuff. So if you guys want, I can also send those in another medium if you're interested in checking out what's been done so far.
Do you have a video recorded already?
Not yet. I can probably put together a video and throw that on YouTube or something that everybody can look at.
Does everybody know what this thing does?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is everybody familiar with this? I know Steve talked about it in the last community call, but maybe some of you aren't quite. Maybe some of you weren't there. Okay, no. There's at least one no, so I will explain what it is. So, PowerShell IoT. Now that we have PowerShell Core, and we also have PowerShell Core working on devices like the Raspberry Pi, we wanted to investigate in some scenarios where you can use PowerShell to interact with sensors and such on, for example, a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And so what we have so far is a few demos of like turning on a light and turning on a water pump and reading from a temperature sensor. All these plugged into the Pi, and you can interact with these devices via PowerShell. It's looking pretty good. And what we want to do from a team perspective is provide the foundation, the PowerShell IoT module, which implements a bunch of common IoT protocols, GPIO, I2C, etc., and then help the community make things on top of that for specific sensors and such. So there'll be more on that in the coming weeks and such, and yeah, it's going to be fun. Any questions about that? Was that a decent explanation? Does that sound cool? All right, cool. Yeah, so I'll work on getting a video together so that you all can see just how cool it actually is. And I actually, yesterday, I got it working with Enter PS Session into a Raspberry Pi, and was able to remote edit and debug in VS Code using the PowerShell extension. So kind of like bringing all of our stuff together, and that was really, really fun to do. So I think that is a perfect segue into editor services. So for editor services, unless anybody has any questions on IoT. Okay, editor services. So I saw Keith is on the call. I don't know if Patrick is here either as well, but editor services is still alive. There's been it's been a while since we've had a release, but bear with me. I've been getting ramped up on the project. It's David did an awesome job with it, and let's be honest, I'm trying to fill David Wilson's shoes, which is both intimidating and probably impossible. But thanks to the magic of open source, I can still talk to David, and he can answer my questions and all that. He's been super awesome in helping us. David Wilson ++, yeah. So we actually should have a release of editor services and the VS Code extension coming next week. That's going to be 1.6.0, because there's a few features, a lot of bug fixes that came from Keith and Patrick, a couple from myself. So hopefully there'll be a lot of stability there. But I also worked on a few other things related to remoting in the extension, some cool PS Edit stuff where you can pipe in file names and open all of those files both locally in a remote session into like PS Edit or Open Editor file, if those of you use that feature at all. Yeah, a lot of miscellaneous things. Patrick has been doing an awesome job getting PS Readline working in VS Code. I actually saw a picture of it, and it's really coming together. I give him a lot of credit. He's been working tirelessly on that. And although that's not going to make it in 1.6.0, we're tracking that to be in 1.7.0. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I know that's something that like everybody wants, is seeing PS Readline in the VS Code extension, and my answer to that is soon. And I I think that's about it. At least for now. For those of you going to the MVP Summit, soon is not soon enough. Very true, Keith. Very true. For those of you going to the MVP Summit, I'll be there. I'll be talking with Keith and even I think we're going to get Adam to talk as well about just editing PowerShell and the tools behind that. And we're gonna see what we can do about getting David to show up for the talk as well. But he's not an MVP. But we'll work on that.
We'll
He
do,
should
Mark.
be.
Thanks for joining the call. Sorry to interrupt you. I just see Mark hopping off here, and yeah, I'll do my best, man. I think for those of you that are not MVPs, we also obviously have the PowerShell Summit. PowerShell Summit NA?
Yeah.
PowerShell Conference NA,
Yes.
coming up in the beginning of April. So that's still a little while off, but we'll be talking about all this good stuff there as well for those of you that are attending. And we will also I tentatively, I don't know if anybody's talked to you yet, but I tentatively am going to both Summit NA and Conference EU.
Yeah,
So I think,
oh, EU.
yes.
Oh, I don't know about
Yeah.
EU.
Yeah, but make sure you guys get your tickets, and we've got plenty of stuff to talk about in a lot more detail. So, yeah.
I think I'll also be doing some IoT talks at the MVP Summit and the PS Summit NA. So that'll be cool.
Yes, absolutely. We only got 3 minutes here. We also always want to open the floor to grab bag of questions that are not on our agenda. What do you guys got for me? What's on your mind? What's giving you hassles? Anything? Anyone want to yell at me about SSH stuff?
I was actually going to ask a question about SSH. So
There you go.
I noticed that Win32 OpenSSH seems to be something that Microsoft's committed to working on and providing as a Windows solution for that space. I remember Steve saying on the last call that you don't have to use that, and you can use essentially any SSH client. Is that completely true? And if so, is there any guidance from Microsoft on how one would go about leveraging another client outside of the Win32 OpenSSH client?
To connect to a Windows SSH server?
Just as the client in general. So the client component of the SSH component of that.
So there's a couple things to unpack. So talking in purely OpenSSH land, we're fully compatible with the SSH spec. So for instance, if I stand up a Win32 OpenSSH server on a Windows box, I can use another Windows box with PuTTY to connect to that thing. So that's just speaking the SSH protocol and not not anything fancy with PowerShell and really just purely SSH and stood in and stood out, text being piped over the wire. If you're talking about the PowerShell integration with OpenSSH, where we're doing PowerShell remoting over the SSH protocol, my understanding there is that we are still hard-coded to an OpenSSH-based SSH client. So actually, all we're doing in PowerShell core is actually shelling out to ssh.exe as long as it's in your path. Jim's putting shelling out in quotes, and he's accurate there. But we're essentially, if ssh.exe is not in your path and it's not OpenSSH based, then we'll screw something up. And the same is true for registering PowerShell as a subsystem. For the server side component where you want to open a server to PowerShell remoting over SSH, and currently that is OpenSSH specific as well because we're implementing the subsystem interface that is specific to OpenSSH. I'm open to supporting more SSH stuff there, but I'm not actually aware of any other subsystems on the subsystem technologies on the server side that we can take advantage for this. And we could potentially look at other SSH clients that integrate with PowerShell, but I'm not sure that there's an immense amount of value there. But does that answer your question, or is there?
No, I think it does. It was the latter of the two scenarios you posted, and
Okay.
I think you.
Yeah, I am certainly open to supporting more things if there are some scenarios where Win32 OpenSSH cannot be consumed. I should say that as many of you Windows insiders probably already know, the SSH client is maybe it hasn't shipped yet. I believe we got the changes in time, but SSH client should be on by default in RS4. So we're actually we are shipping in System 32 next to tar and curl that got shipped into the insider builds as well. So it should be a first class citizen that you can rely on to be there. But yeah. Anybody got anything else? I'm not running off to another meeting, so I'm more than happy to answer any more questions if people got them. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate the call. It's awesome as usual. We got a ton of good stuff out of this. As I told Darwin, I'm going to punch up these notes with the recording. I'll try to get them out pretty soon here. Oh, this is good. We got a couple more. Okay, having SSH and Win32 mean for updates via Chocolatey. You and me need to schedule a call, Darwin, because we're going back and forth with like 12 paragraph GitHub responses, and I think we should just short circuit that one and figure it out. I think it's still so SSH is still a feature on demand, or it will be no matter what, even if it's installed by default, which means that it's uninstallable. So the SSHs should probably not exist side by side. I think clients can, because what can't exist side by side is the SSH agent, and actually because that's what's used for the key-based management, even for the clients, you probably would want to uninstall the feature on demand first. So they are trusted installer protected, but it's like there's literally a DISM command, remove Windows capability, and a PowerShell commandlet, remove Windows capability, that will fix that. There's a great, this is a little bit off topic, but I got a good side ping. We already have revved some stuff on the documentation, as Sean talked about, or as Sean has been working on. Sean, you want to talk about that for a second, or you want me to speak to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically we just refactored the table of contents. We're using that as a way to sort of understand where the major gaps are in our documentation, and I think it's a lot better. I think it's we've got like setup and configure and concepts instead of this thing like core PowerShell, which is really confusing when we also have a PowerShell core. Having sort of like a smattering of things in one bucket and not in the other, it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So we would love feedback on the table of contents there. If you see any major issues, one of the big things I think we're missing is the conceptual documentation still on MSDN for the SDK and commandlet building. But as we referred to earlier, I think we're trying to get that over and refactor for the modern day. Darwin, I just want to make sure, did that answer your question on the Sin32 placement is going to muck up all existing SSH clients that rely on the path? Right. Yes. And I don't know how we first class it without doing that. The big one for me, I don't think that the risk is high except for with the Git SSH client. And I know that that's going to probably bust right off the bat. So you're saying, yep, program files Microsoft and then add to the end of the path. Yeah, but that won't give us an SSH client in the way that we want it, right? I mean, we really want a primitive, dependable SSH client. And I don't know, like you and I should really just schedule a call, Darwin, because I think we should really get into it and talk about all the scenarios, because I know you've got some that I'm not thinking about. But I think the only real path forward to success is getting Git for Windows updated to understand where we are in the path. Again, it's going to be a one-liner to remove the thing. You don't have to go in and become trusted installer and delete it. It is remove Windows capability, and that will use trusted installer to get rid of it via DISM. But I do know people are going to hit those pain points. I just don't know how to preempt avoiding them because there's such a long tail of them. But I think having SSH as a first-class citizen in Windows for the long term is highly desirable.
What did you say it was shipping with? I missed that part. You said SSH is shipping with what?
It's shipping as what's called a feature on demand, which is or an FOD. It's essentially the new version of optional features. But it's going to be a feature on demand that is installed by default. So in the same way that I could go and, I don't know what the old dialogue was with apps and features here. I'm trying to think of like maybe in Europe, I think you guys can like uninstall Windows Media Player or whatever. I'm looking at the old turn Windows features on and off, like Internet Explorer 11. This is a great example. It's an optional feature. It's actually also a feature on demand. And if you don't want it, you can uninstall it, and the XE goes away, and the shortcuts go away, and all that sort of thing. So, or maybe the XEs don't go away with IE11. I'm not actually sure. I know in the old days we didn't remove them, but with SSH we will remove SSH agent. We will remove SSH.exe, keygen. All of those will disappear when you uninstall this package. And yes, you're right in that you'll have to know the one-liner, but I think paying this price now is worth it to have SSH.exe in Windows, as a single code-based single implementation without all this min-GW stuff that everyone's been sort of shipping with their own applications for forever. So it'll be a pain point for a minute, but we'll make it through, I hope.
Which versions of Windows are planning to be supported with that?
So that will be desktop, server, and server core. Other SKUs, they own their destiny with SSH.exe, and it's unclear to me which of them are going to choose to have it installed by default or not. When you say off on desktop OS, do you mean the client?
I just mean that I don't know, like there should be a little bit of respect for all the other things that have been done for OpenSSH on Windows for the last 20 years, and I think just throwing it on the path before everything else that's already there, then you've got an existing SSH client, and I don't know. Are you talking about like on a Windows 10 major update, like 1709 or whatever, it would all of a sudden be there and beyond?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of stuff that might be relying on the path that might go sideways.
Do you know how we would preempt that and fix that problem before?
Don't reinstall it.
Well, I mean, is there like inevitably you want it pre-installed eventually, right? I mean, is there, in your opinion, it should never ever be pre-installed?
Well, sure. So, but not with any existing OS, right? Not on a service pack upgrade. We don't call them service pack upgrades anymore. I'm sorry, 1709 for example. But like, I don't think it's because if you have a client on there, then.
So this will only show up with an upgrade installed to the next, not within the 1709 branch, but the next branch, like when you kick over to whatever they're calling the next major feature update.
Right, I understand, but it's still a working system that's got an SSH setup, server or client, is going to all of a sudden have this code show up in System 32, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge. Is like especially on servers, you might have automation. It might be, I don't know, Jenkins server. I mean, there could be a lot of junk going on that is going to go sideways as soon as that shows up on the higher order on the path. I don't know.
I think it's a very good point, and I might even schedule a call with you for like this week or next week, Darwin, to just talk more, because I think I want to get the heart of this, and it's
I guess the really challenge is like the whole move towards OpenSSH is great, but then if there's been a bunch of blended shops where the Linux guys have had to get SSH working on Windows, and then all of a sudden a move by the very project that's trying to make sure they have really solid services like turns a bunch of automation sideways. I don't know. I just think like you get a lot of blowback from that.
No, I think you're very right, and it's not something that.
I guess one thing that's a little bit like even when we talked about the folder name, I still don't use OpenSSH under program files. And there's way back there's a comment made about squatting. Well, it's not squatting when Microsoft wasn't into open source for 2 decades. So I think that even where it goes for the advised place, you should just respect the fact that there's been a lot of other options available over the years. And there's
I absolutely agree. I just the part that I struggle with is the transition, right? I mean, it's just like I think there's been overwhelming sentiment that people want to have a Windows machine where they install Windows and they open a terminal and SSH is available to them without having to go jump through hoops, and or even find out about our special one-liner for installing that thing. And I think that's really the requirement that I'm grappling with.
Yeah, so System 32, though, is putting you at the basest level of the path in most cases. So if there's a way to handle it path-wise and still have that for a system that doesn't have any other client or server, boom, you're live and golden. Well, it won't affect server because servers should be fully pathed anyway, I'd sure hope. But, yeah.
So let me ask you kind of a technical question. Would you say it is sufficient to check the system path looking for the executable and say, hey, I couldn't find it in your path, so I'm going to decide that you don't really have it?
I think that might be sufficient for ones that could get confused by all of a sudden it showing up on the path. Then you'd be right down to a very narrow band of anything that checks the path, then goes for a stipulated config that it has. I know that the Git one is okay because it's not on the path, probably for similar reasons.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's if you're trying to serve kind of two principles here of making it easy and then not clobbering somebody who already has one, can be kind of a thorny problem to solve.
Yeah, I guess if it also doesn't show up on a service pack, I don't know if you have the capability to say, if this was an existing system and we're going up a level, leave it off by default. If this is a fresh build, put it on by default. I don't know if you have that level of granularity, but that would be an example of something that would also respect installed systems. And then that way, the next time they engineer, like if they go from, like they re-engineer that server that they're putting an SSH client on, well, then they'll, while they're in an engineering mode, expecting to take some possible breaking changes, that's when they experience it, rather than, oh, we just upgraded 1,000 servers and they all just went sideways as far as what we use SSH for.
Should we feel bad if we replace any existing SSH.exe in System 32?
I mean, I know the state of the bug fixes out on OpenSSH. It seems to me like, at this point, but it would also...
System 32 is kind of powered.
What's that?
System 32 is kind of owned by Microsoft, right?
Yeah, sort of, but the thing is, I don't know. I would definitely do some. I don't know if you have access to telemetry that could tell you how much that is going on. So if it's low, I would either hammer it or don't overwrite it. Another situation.
My take here is actually that the risk here is extremely, extremely low, because today the way that servicing works is that unless you're on a whitelist inside of System 32, we blow away your thing every time we patch your machine with a feature-based upgrade. So, we put everything in Windows.old, and then we copy the new stuff into Windows. Windows.old stays around for a little while if you want to go and find some stuff out of there that got lost. But yeah, System 32, it's we consider it immutable at this point.
Yeah, and immutable under our control, Microsoft control.
minus what is whitelisted. So for instance, DSC configurations get whitelisted and sort of copied over from Windows.old to Windows, similar like your hosts file, right? But if you're going and creating new files there that aren't on our whitelist, like you're hosed anyway. And so that's not a scenario I'm concerned about, but I am concerned about a scenario where someone like equally the same problem you're describing, I'm dealing with the opposite problem, which is that someone goes and installs RS4, or excuse me, the whatever the next feature update is of Windows, and they think they're using the new SSH. They think that Microsoft's Open SSH implementation, here it is. Because I saw in the blog that this upgrade was supposed to give it to me, but I keep running SSH, and the thing that I'm expecting, which is that I'm using, for instance, keys sitting in .ssh now because that's what the Microsoft blog told me to do. It's not working, and we don't ship a witch. I have a witch in my profile, but they're not going to know that. It's Git's MinGW SSH, or it's Cygwin's SSH, or it's whatever. So it's like that's and as somebody said here, it's like, well, this is for insiders to like figure out and break on. I understand the sentiment there, and I kind of feel the same way from a philosophical standpoint. Like this is just a pain point we're going to have to work through. But on the flip side, like. I don't know how to preempt it. I don't know what a transition path looks like other than posting a bunch of blogs, and even then, I'm still going to break people when we inevitably make the switch over. So you and I should schedule a call, Darwin. I want to dive in and talk about your chocolatey package and stuff too, and figure out what we should do. But I think you raised a ton of good points. I just yeah, it's a really thorny problem, and I mean this is going to happen with tar and curl, right? Like. Yeah, it's not as probably not used in quite as much automation, or the semantics of them are similar enough to the Cygwin-based ones or the MinGW ones that this isn't going to break anyone, or the risk is lower because there's no key files that exist in a specific place or anything like that. But the same thing will happen. I mean, tar and curl. People have been using them on Windows for years, and they've had all kinds of other ways to install them. And now we're going to ship a tar and curl into System 32 by default. So
but I guess with SSH, where the new remoting's going to depend on it, right? So it's going to be
the new remoting. So actually, interestingly, the new remoting, I can, if I have a MinGW based SSH client that's sitting in my path, the PowerShell core based remoting client should work with that. You shouldn't need ours.
Okay.
It just has to be an OpenSSH based client in that it has the right parameters and the same semantics and that sort of thing. But we don't. The server is the more important part where we've. Actually, even the server, like we work against generic OpenSSH clients. That's why on Linux you do the same thing that you do on Windows. So we've been very careful not to conflate changes in PowerShell with the native work we've been doing in OpenSSH.
Cool. When you say Windows.old, I haven't been watching carefully enough, but when I go through to a new major build of Windows, do I get that? Or that's only if I forcibly install over with media or with the upgrade tool?
You get that even with Windows Update. Yeah, I get a flighted insider build from internal build shares like every 2 or 3 days. Every 2 or 3 days, I have a new Windows.old. I come up to my workstation, I turn it on. It says, hi, we're getting things set up for you. Every time you see the hi, we're getting things set up for you, that is like re-provisioning the new Windows folder.
Okay. Interesting.
I think actually, I don't know. That might be installing like the Apex default universal Windows platform apps or something like that. But the spinning wheel where your updates configuring and all that stuff, that's like unpacking your new Windows folder and bin dropping files and messing with the registry and doing all that stuff. So at least that's my cursory layman's understanding of it. I'm definitely not an expert on that deployment thing, but I get a lot of flights, so this is the pattern that I've seen emerge. And I know with DSC we had to explicitly go and fix a bug where that servicing mechanism was not bringing over your current .mof, which was sitting in System 32 because it wasn't whitelisted as something that needed to be copied from Windows.old.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it'd be good to talk about it.
Yes, definitely. And that might be the RSAT thing, and maybe we should file a bug, Nicholas, against the RSAT guys about whitelisting their stuff. That may very well be the case. There was a comment way up here from Keith Hill about the PSRL. I didn't know what that was.
Read line.
Oh, PS read line. Oh, 2, still on track to make it into 6.1. Yes. So we are, for me, 6.1 is not the shipping vehicle. The shipping vehicle that we are most concerned about is not the next major release of Windows, but the one after that. And we've been chartered to fix the screen reader problem. And this is something that PS Readline 2.0 addresses in the way that it does WriteLine. And basically that means in the old days, like PS Readline, every time you typed a character, PS Readline would read the entire line, rewrite the entire line with your new character. And that was done because of problems with the console APIs and that sort of thing. I think we now have the ability to manipulate individual characters, which means that instead of the screen reader thinking that a new line was just written and trying to read that line from scratch every time you type a character, we now will read the line as if it's one line that you're typing out and not start over. So we need to get PS Readline in a shippable state so that it can ship within Windows. That means that it will very likely be the PS Readline default for Windows PowerShell as well. So this is one of those places where we've said that we're not doing like feature innovation in Windows PowerShell, but there are some cases where in order to meet certain servicing requirements, we do things that look very featurey in Windows PowerShell, and this will be one of those things. So say very, very likely going to Windows PowerShell. But yeah, if that PS Readline 2 very likely going to Windows PowerShell, I just don't want to make the hard commitment there. But it's the current plan of record. 6.1, like again, I have a strong desire for it to get into 6.1, but it's really our deadline is oriented around the Windows ship cycle on this one. But if I can move it up to make it into 6.1, I think that's highly desirable. I know I used that word on accident, Keith. RS4. I'm not supposed to use that one, but we're talking about the one after that one. RS5. Yeah. Not supposed to use those, but they're on Wikipedia, so it's kind of hard for me to.
So 6.1 is a maybe, but not like.
Yes. I'd say maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. Get command should find arbitrary exes only on the path. Yeah, that's my which function. It just does get command on the thing and looks at the path if it's a binary. So. That's on my GitHub in my profile. You can find it. Does it really?
Yeah, it does.
In System 32.
Yeah.
Where SSH doesn't do anything for me. Which SSH gives me my System 32, but...
Where.exe.
Oh, of course.
What?
Oh, but that still doesn't tell me which. Gives me 2. Tells me there's 2 on my... I guess they're in order of precedence from top to bottom, right?
Correct.
One would hope.
One should hope so. Yeah. This, my Linux biases are showing, guys. Sorry.
It's because you didn't ask which, you asked where. It answered the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know we had a where. All right, well, I think that's wrapping it up. We're 25 minutes over, so I think we're actually going to lose the room here pretty soon. Yeah, no, you guys have been awesome, and I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for everybody's time. I'll try to get this one up I'm not as fast as Steve, but maybe hopefully this week we'll have this YouTube video up. Thanks again, guys. Everybody have a great rest of your week. And if you've got the long holidays? It's Monday, right?
Monday's a holiday.
Yeah.
In the
For
US.
those of you in the States, hopefully enjoy your Monday off. Talk to you guys soon.
Ciao.